Gary, I got a question for you. Do you think that showing agreements are the new buyer agreement?
That is a great question. I think that's something that the industry as a whole is trying to kind of wrap our hands around and our arms around and understand, like, what the heck are these showing agreements? Are buyer agreements, are they dead? Or are they more like the expanded version of what we need to be using now?
Well, that's what we're going to get into in today's episode of Marketing Clubcast. We're talking about showing agreements, we're talking about buyer agreements, and everything in between. So if you're getting a lot of online leads, or Gary, as a listing agent, maybe you're getting a lot of sign calls.
Yep.
Like some buyers, they just want to see the property.
Here's the thing. If you're looking to buy a house and you're just now starting out on your venture, do you want to sign a long-term marriage agreement with somebody?
If you don't know them, I just want to go see this home. I saw this home online. Hey, I'm
Right.
at this house because I see your sign here and I just want to see the home, right? And so sometimes they just want to see the home and they're not ready to commit to like a full exclusive buyer rep agreement at that point in time, right? Like we actually might use, or in the past, we may have used the process of showing homes to be able to build trust, demonstrate our value, and then get a buyer agreement signed. But with the new rules, we have to have that in place before we start showing homes. So what's the solution? And there are a lot of solutions to getting buyer rep agreements signed. We've been talking about them, but I thought we would visit this from a different angle.
Okay.
Not too long ago, we got to catch up with one of our friends, Christopher Dean. Christopher Dean is on the Monica Foster team with EXP out of Houston, Texas. And they're one of the top teams in the country, top team in Houston. And they do a ton of online leads, right? So I think they're like a Zillow Premier partner, and they're in the program to be able to get lots of.
Did you catch from his call what percentage of their business is coming from online leads?
It's pretty significant because I know he spends every dollar that they can on online leads, and they have it highly managed, highly tracked. But I didn't catch up with like what the difference was, because they also get a lot of sign calls. They are big enough now where they can do billboards and stuff like that and see a return on that kind of marketing. But
Got it.
With the type of marketing that they're doing, and with them being heavy on online leads, they early on found that they were running into this problem of, hey, with this new requirement of having a buyer agreement signed, what are we going to do with all these leads? Because they're not going to sign that. Right.
No. Ultimately, here's the thing: is most home buyers who are coming to you who are not referred or are not past clients, where you already have that know, like, and trust built with them, right? So if there's not that trust already built, how are you supposed to cajole, convince somebody into buying some sort of a long-term exclusive buyer representation agreement with you? And it just doesn't make sense. And so what I love about this, what Christopher Dean is doing, and now some states are actually coming out with state documents, like with state associations like Florida, they're coming out and saying, okay, here is a showing agreement that doesn't basically marry you to the buyer and the buyer representation. And so I think this is probably a wave amidst all the chaos that a lot of agents are reporting that they're seeing in the market right now. Like, I think this is going to be a safe harbor for them to be able to work.
Well, interestingly enough, Zillow came out with a touring agreement a few months ago, and they caught a lot of flack from the industry because of the no compensation portion in that showing agreement. And I was right there with everybody else at the time. I was like, I just don't see how something like this is going to work. And I think it's because a lot of us in the earlier phases of how the settlement was being reported and the updates that we were getting from the National Association of Realtors is initially there was a lot of confusion between what a buyer agreement is versus what a buyer rep agreement is, right? And so the new rule is you have to have a buyer agreement. That does not mean it automatically implies that it's an exclusive buyer representation agreement, right? And so I remember struggling a little bit with seeing what the touring agreement. Now I've been proven that, hey, this actually could work. And Christopher Dean, and they got about 40 folks on their team. and they've been using this. And he shared with me some numbers. He was definitely an early innovator. He saw the writing on the wall and said, hey, because we're heavily on online leads, we're going to have to figure out how do we continue operating and not lose opportunity? How do we continue to work with people who just want to see a home because that's what they saw on Zillow or wherever, and that's what they want. They want to see this home. They want to see something very specific, and they're not ready to say have the whole compensation conversation. They're not ready to have the whole representation conversation with you. They just want to go see that house. And so I got a chance to catch up with Christopher Dean. He literally has run like 700 people through this process already, right? Like already he's run so many hundreds and hundreds of people through this process. And what he's finding is it's become a really good qualifying tool for them, right? So when you're having online leads, you know that, well, I mean, like a lot of times we think that online leads are not quality because you have to go through a lot of them to find the ones that are true opportunities. But having a showing agreement in place actually allows them to qualify more effectively who's really ready. But then what's happening is they're using that opportunity of showing homes to then build the rapport,
Right.
build trust, show and demonstrate their value, which can absolutely happen while you're showing properties, right? Because you're able to share.
Well, so Chris, I think you just touched on something that's really, really important. And for everybody who's watching this, if you've never read the book "Who Moved My Cheese," you should go read that. It's a fantastic book because it is a classic, and it feels like in real estate, somebody, if we're mice and we're used to going down this maze and we know where the cheese is, it feels like somebody came in and just moved our cheese, and we're like, where'd my cheese go? And instead, I think it's what this the showing agreement or the touring agreement, however you want to call it, what it does is it offers us an opportunity to get back to a normal state of operations as buyers agents, right? Because for the most part, unless our clients, our buyer clients, are referred to us or they're past clients and there's already a lot of trust built, when do we have that opportunity to build trust with them? Well, historically, what I would have said, Chris, is if I get an online lead or a sign call or somebody like that, or a walk-in, and if I've got desk duty and I'm taking on calls, when do I get the opportunity to build that trust? Well, it's not going to be, hey, come into the office and let's meet immediately. It's just, it doesn't work that way. It's not natural that way, and buyers are not naturally going to operate that way. And so just because our cheese has been moved, does that mean that we have to move the cheese for our buyers? And instead, maybe these buyer agreements, these touring agreements, get us back to a state of normalcy that allows us as buyers agents to do what we always do: show homes, build trust, and then get a buyer rep agreement when they're ready to write an offer. So it seems to me like that is a great idea, and it seems like Christopher Dean and his entire team they've cracked the code on that.
Definitely.
But I also love what you said, man. It's a qualifier, because if a buyer is not willing, ready, and able to sign a document saying, yes, if I buy this house from you, you'll get compensated. If they're not willing to do something like that, then why should I be willing to get in my car, spend my time, and go show up somewhere where, by the way, statistically, I just found this out, statistically, 50% of home buyers who schedule tours with agents, when they don't have an agreement in place, don't even show up to the house.
Oh, wow. That's not surprising. I mean, it's a very low commit when you're online.
There's no commitment.
Right. When you're online, you're click, click, click. You haven't engaged anybody in real life, so you don't realize you're letting a human being down, right? That they are getting up and suiting up and showing up, and I'm just gonna totally makes sense. It's interesting. So this using a showing agreement to essentially get to a buyer rep agreement, right? So that's a process. Now, we've talked extensively about what a sort of normal consultation process, what that would look like, where we use an initial consultation, and then, we send them some information, and then we have our buyer strategy session with them, or, people call this the buyer presentation. So, we've been training and talking about doing that. And I feel like for most customers, customers who are in fact going to be referred or through your sphere of influence, it's probably like 78% of the business that you're getting, can probably fall into your normal pattern of I'm going to schedule time to work with them and consult with them, have them sign an agreement, and then we will go get to work. But I do think you were talking about essentially what I think equates to the consumer first approach when they're an online lead or when they are already standing in front of the home calling on a sign call or whatever the case may be. When I was talking to Christopher Dean about it, he had said something that stood out to me. He said, for a long time, and many times even today, right? The process that we had in real estate was find the agent and then find the home, right? So I find an agent who's going to then show me homes and then I'm going to buy the home. And what?
Right. So that is data sharing and pre-hardcore internet.
Yeah. Usage. So in the old days of real estate, it was I'm going to go find an agent, and I needed to in order to see what was on the market, right? And then came the internet, sure. And then came.
We were at the time that was our value proposition as realtors is we were the gatekeepers of all of the information. We are no longer the gatekeepers of all of the information.
No, internet, Zillow, right? So now from an internet perspective, and let's say all the home search sites, they've created a process where the consumer can find a home and then find the agent to show them the home or homes that they want to look at, right? And it's interesting because I think roughly half of buyers say that they found the home that they purchased. And why is that, or how is that? It's not like they found it and they still work, 80-90% of them still worked with a real estate agent to buy the home. So why do they feel like they found it? Well, it's probably because they went online, they saw it online, or they were the first person who noticed and said, hey, Gary, can we go take a look at this home? So I do think that it's interesting if you put that, if you were thinking from that perspective, and if I'm thinking online leads or sign calls and stuff like that, then I'm thinking consumer first. They just want to see the home, and I want to make it as easy as possible for them to do so. Along the way, I need to build trust. Along the way, I need to show them my value proposition. Along the way, we need to have the paperwork taken care of. And I think that instead of viewing things as it has to be this way, like the showing agreement introduces, another option for us in working with people. Just like having a really good process for getting buyer rep agreements signed. This is also very important, right? Like there's no reason to use a showing agreement if you've worked with a customer before, if you already know the person like through your sphere of influence or they were referred to you from somebody. At that point, you can sit them down and go through a more consultative process, which includes getting that paperwork taken care of. But I think about finding ways.
Now that does add. That does add something like there is a full process into building trust, but we're not talking about the full process today because there is a process between a touring or a showing agreement and a buyer rep agreement and writing offers. Like there's an entire process there to build trust. But what we're talking about right now is how do we avoid having to get a buyer representation agreement and building all of this trust just to show a freaking house.
I will say this though, Gary. I think that, the educating people, and we've talked about using an initial consultation and a pre-appointment packet, which is like a pre-listing packet, and then using a buyer presentation. We call that our buyer strategy session, and using that process to be able to really give people give buyers in particular. And sellers, but in this case, we're speaking about buyers, giving prospective buyers, concrete reasons why they should hire you, giving prospective buyers concrete reasons to justify the fees that you charge. A lot of times we don't do that, right? A lot of times we don't necessarily explicitly have those conversations or do the activities or tasks that are necessary for someone to fully value what you bring to the table. I was catching up with one of our clients, and they were telling us how in the past they used to shield their client from all of the mayhem of the transaction. Right.
Dude, that's what I used to do. Right. And I used to I got in trouble with that with my clients because they thought I actually didn't do anything.
Right. So you here you are working really hard, dealing with all the craziness, and in your mind, you're like, hey, I'm going to shield my client from this headache. This is just hassle. But unfortunately, in doing that, you shield them from the value you bring to the table. Now, that doesn't mean you stress your client out, but you can tell them after the fact, we had a situation, but don't worry, we got it resolved. Here's what happened, and here's what the solution was. And I just wanted you to know about that, but it's all taken care of now, right? And so that way they are able to have a better understanding of what you bring to the table. And I feel like, using our process is another way to preemptively do that before, so that you don't have to go through the process to show your value. You should be doing it the entire way through. Now, I think with the showing agreement, anyone who wants to ensure that, especially if you're providing premium level service, if you're providing premium service, then you are earning the fees that you charge. But sometimes we have to be able to articulate that premium service to people and show them how we're fulfilling on that, so that when we get to the settlement statement, it's not a problem. And I think that being able to blend, let's say, a showing agreement with our regular process, or whatever people's regular process is probably a good way to make sure that you're clearly articulating everything that you bring to the table and providing that premium level service. Because if you just go from showing agreement and then really don't focus on heavily investing in making sure they understand what you're going to do and why you do it, and basically giving them the concrete reasons why to hire you, well, then you go from showing agreement to, let's say, a buyer rep agreement right before you're submitting an offer, or maybe it's like a one-time agreement. But at that point, though, they might be wondering, what is it that you're doing for me? And you don't want to be at that place. I feel like when you're writing the offer, or when you're getting into that negotiation phase, that they should be feeling very confident about what you're doing for them and why you're doing it. Yep. And so it's not necessarily just go use this. Just go use the showing agreement. Everything's going to be fine. Right, because I, in some ways, I don't think a showing agreement. The showing agreement's not a new buyer agreement or buyer rep agreement for sure. It's a buyer agreement, but it's not a buyer rep agreement. And in order for us, I think, to really have people understand our value, do you think that buyer agreement conversation, buyer rep agreement conversation is pretty necessary for them to understand the full value of what we bring to the table?
That's 100% true. Is that, and I want everybody here to understand the negative consequences or repercussions of not building trust and educating people all the way through the process. One, they're not going to trust you. Two, they're not going to hire you, especially if they end up paying your fee. And even if they do, and you don't educate them about the process and then build trust through the process and talk to them about all of the hurdles that you're overcoming and everything that you're doing, you are simply going to produce dissatisfaction. And what I see happening here, Chris, is that now, with even more transparency for a real estate transaction, buyers are they have more of an ability or opportunity to be dissatisfied, because now they're going to be more attached to that money. They're going to be more attached to how that money is being spent and who they're hiring. And so it's going to be even more important for us, more critical for us, if we are going to produce satisfaction and satisfied customers, which a satisfied customer in the end of a transaction is somebody who says, wow, that was totally worth it hiring you. Wow, that was so awesome. I'm going to refer you to everybody I know. Wow, that was amazing. When I go to sell this house or buy an investment property or do anything else related to real estate, I'm hiring you because of these things. We have to have processes in place. But like we said, the showing agreement is the first step. It's like a micro commitment along that path. And it allows us to have the opportunity to build trust and satisfaction with buyers that we might not have ever had the opportunity to do before.
Well, so, like at this point, I think, if you're watching this, you've got two options, right? You can move to consult with the consumer and engage them in a process to sign that buyer rep agreement, right? Like, I think that's a perfectly valid way. That's what we're currently doing. Many of our clients are doing that as well. But the second option is you can show homes, and when ready to write an offer, use a limited buyer agreement. So you can use the you can use the showing agreement to show homes, and then when they're ready to write an offer, use a limited buyer rep agreement, like a single property, for example, to get the agreement in place, or some blend of that. And what we're finding is we've been doing and have been talking to people on both ends of the spectrum, and it's both are working. Really, the key is in how do you present this information? Even with a showing agreement, how are you presenting that information to people? Are you setting an expectation of what's going to happen next? Are you setting an expectation of future buyer representation and exclusive buyer representation? Or are you just kind of letting it go? Because I think that being very intentional about the communication that you're going to share with them is the key here. But avoiding the conversation, we know that that's not going to work, right? Trying to hide the compensation conversation and sweep it under the carpet,
Well,
that's not going to work.
it's not even legal anymore, right? Like that's been stripped away.
Yeah. So, I mean, you could try to just fire off a DocuSign and hope that they sign it. But I mean, that's not being effective as a professional, right? We have to sit people down and have them understand what are the contractual. I mean, obviously we're not attorneys, so we're not consulting them. We are helping them try to understand the agreements that we have in place, and then of course suggesting that they have that reviewed by an attorney. But avoiding the conversation, that's not going to work. So if you're curious, if you want to learn more about our buyer processes and our buyer representation processes and how we use initial consultations and pre-appointment packets and our buyer strategy session template to be able to get those buyer rep agreements signed, definitely check out our website at thepaperlessagent.com. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the Marketing Clubcast. Take care, and we'll see you then.